As introduced, my name is Kendra Flagler. I am the Director of HR Strategy at Ontario Power Generation. Most of you have probably heard of OPG, but those that haven't, we're one of the largest electricity generators in North America and proud to produce about 50% of the electricity that powers our homes and our businesses and certainly the building that we're in today. So really look forward to the conversation today with Rose, talking about the employee journey. I think a lot of us are thinking about how we measure the effectiveness of bringing people into the organization, retaining them. So looking forward to some tips that I know Rose is going to share with you. So Rose, I'll turn over to you to introduce yourself and share us a little bit about your company as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kendra. So my name's Rose DiBartolomeo. I work at Lawrie Insurance Group. Unlike Kendra, probably many of you in this room have not heard of us. We are a family-owned and operated insurance brokerage located in Hamilton, Ontario. We've got about 140 employees, and I like to say we're like that little engine that just keeps going. What I love about our organization, and it's important for our discussion today, is our philosophy for our clients is really to have that warm blanket and really ensure that we're tailoring those insurance solutions for them. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that translated into our journey.
Excellent. Thanks, Lawrie. Or Rose, I said Lawrie. Thanks, Rose. Okay, so to get us started, can you share with us why the employee journey was a focus for Lawrie Insurance Group? What was sort of the business problem or opportunity you were trying to solve for?
Yeah, so I had joined Lawrie about 4 years ago. HR was still relatively new in the organization and had been a bit disjointed. But as I kind of got through the organization and the data and speaking to people, one thing I did notice in the organization is, the good and the bad. The great is we had so many people who had been with the organization for a long period of time, coming just out of school and spending their whole careers there. So you're talking 20, 25, 30, 35. We just celebrated a 38-year anniversary. So they must have been 12, I think, when they started. So, and so while that's amazing, we are getting to a point where they're probably going to wake up and think, I really just don't want to work anymore. It's been great at Lawrie, but I'm kind of done. And I remember the management meeting where I talked about, we have this percentage of people in this tenure group, and what's the plan? What have you talked about? So it's not just that employee base, it's that client base, right? We've got these seasoned people who have large books of business, and what are we doing? And sort of the blank stare of like, okay, that's probably where I need to start. It's like, it's not just how do we transition those people seamlessly, but how do we bring in that next generation so that they stay? And so it really became about how do we modernize what we're doing so that we can attract great local talent, but keep them.
Yeah, I think we're probably all dealing with that, right? In terms of trying to attract people, and what attracts people today is very different than what it was 10, 20 years ago. So yeah. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of us, again, are thinking about getting started on some of these things and tackling where we need to make some incremental change. So how did you guys get started? Mm-hmm. How did you maybe use feedback to inform what you were going to go after first?
Yeah, great question. For me, feedback's really important no matter what, so you're really trying to touch as many people as you can in the organization. For me, I approached it really organically because we were family owned and operated. We only have one location, so it was a real great opportunity to sort of stop at people's desks every day or grab a coffee, whatever it may be. For me, I made a point every day of going to the lunchroom. Because we have a great lunchroom. We have a lot of people that go up there. It's a real social time for people. And so I really went up there, and I'm famous for in the lunchroom, I take my HR hat off. So I'm not the HR person. I'm just kind of up there having lunch with everybody. But that was a great opportunity to get real organic feedback. And so things I heard were, I know there's opportunity to grow, but I don't even know what the person next to me does. And I don't know where to grow in the company. It's not just the person next to me. I don't know what personal lines insurance does. And so for me, those were like, okay, everything I do has to connect there somehow. Some things will be in onboarding, some things will be in recruitment, some things will be out of that altogether, and we talk about it at town hall, whatever that is. So it really became that organic feedback. And feedback from other people. I had just started, and I knew what my onboarding experience was, but I had to hear from other people that, day one was okay, it wasn't great, but I didn't learn about the company. I didn't learn what we are really trying to do in the industry. So I had to really take all that feedback and then just compartmentalize and break that down.
Awesome. What I loved about that, Rose, is like the organic part that you talked about. Because I think we think about surveys and we send them out and we have formal programs to try to solicit input, but it's actually those hallway conversations that really give you those nuggets. And I like that was kind of what you leverage versus some formality around. I know we talked about metrics and data, and that's certainly important, but sometimes it's those quiet whispers and conversations that you have in the hallway that really where you get the deep knowledge to help drive those changes. So that's awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks
for sure.
sharing that.
For sure.
So when we were preparing for today, you shared a little bit about what you guys were doing. And I noticed one of the things is you're very intentional about being milestone based around that journey, entry in, 90 days, et cetera. So take us through maybe some of those milestones that you're using at Lawrie Group and how you measure success with those milestones.
Yeah, so for us, milestones were super important, but the way that we aligned those milestones across the journey had to really make sense, and everything had to connect. So for us, we talked about that warm blanket, right? So we talk about our clients, put that warm blanket around our clients. We really needed to put that warm blanket around our employees, right? We want them to stay. We want them to feel that they matter and that they're recognized for their hard work, and all their efforts matter at the beginning, the middle, and the end. So for us in HR, there was a real natural point for that 90-day check-in where we're getting feedback. So we really reframed that 90-day check-in in a way that made more sense, both for the business and for the employee. We are more intentional about how we plan for growth of that employee. That came from that development perspective. So people were really telling us what they wanted to learn, and then I'm taking that away and figuring out how do I make that accessible? Where do I put that so everybody gets it? And then at the end of those exit interviews, right, that's really important information. Sometimes people don't feel comfortable giving information until the end for whatever reason. And so for us, that was really important to hear. Something's been on my mind for like 10 years, and I just never had a chance to really talk about it until now. So all of those points were really important, and they had to connect to the journey somehow of like, how can we make that better?
Awesome. Thanks for that. So you mentioned a bunch of different moments. You talked about the exit. You talked about the 90-day. If I was to ask you sort of, what do you think the most specific point is in the journey that's most important? What would you think in terms of gaining that insight? What would you think it would be and why?
I'd say it's the 90-day check-in. We really revamped that 90-day check-in to be more of a stay interview. So it is very detailed. It is an hour. We really revolve it around our value proposition. We have 3 buckets that we want to talk about. We have very pointed questions that we ask. But for us, the turning point is really, what did we do with that? The 90-day check-in sometimes is just that check mark that you do, and what do you do with all that information? For us, I really wanted to change that and feel like we talk a lot, your feedback matters. Well, your feedback really matters at the beginning. It matters all the time, but it really matters at the beginning because we have the opportunity to course correct. So at the end of that 90-day check-in, we have a meeting with the manager. We go through the 90-day check-in. The manager has the opportunity to comment. We create an action plan around that 90-day check-in. What's an easy win? What's an early win? What are things we got to kind of talk about and work through? And what's things that we have to kind of put in the parking lot for now? And then the key point is we actually set up a follow-up email with the employee to go through that action plan. So they really understand why we're working on something now, why something has to hold on. So for us, I think that's really the key because it sets them up for success, but it sets it up for retention.
Awesome. I love that what you talked about is actually doing something with it. So I think we all do. Again, I mentioned about surveys, but the fact that you actually carry through and share back what was done differently, that was interesting. I'm sure I know my colleague is taking some notes as she's trying to think about how we're improving our journey. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So you've put a lot of emphasis on onboarding and early tenure. So were you having a bit of an issue with that, and how have you seen it improve since you've put that focus on that 90-day, as you've mentioned?
Yeah, so when I was going through some of that early data, I did see a little bit of a trend in that 90-day drop off. So people were leaving in 90 days, and some of our exit information was saying there's not really a lot of structure in those first 90 days. So we didn't have onboarding templates for people. For us, we are a very high-performing, fast-paced environment that we still want to be flexible and casual. So how do we kind of create the event? So for us, day one had to be an event. That's how we had to look at it, so that we could kind of work back from there. And all the work that goes into creating day one, so that day one seems like, wow, I had a great day one. It was so much fun. Okay, great. All the 18,000 hours we put into you having day one worked. So for us, it was really a couple of things that we did, and we did them well. We did create those onboarding templates for every department, for each role, so that a manager could easily onboard somebody in 30, 60, 90 days. One thing I think that we did that was probably different that I hadn't done in a previous world was have onboarding huddles. So we had an onboarding team that included the hiring manager, where we looked at, this person's going to sit here, they need their laptop, they need their photo, planning all that time out for day one. And then also that constant communication with the employee. So from sign off to day one, we actually have a couple onboarding huddles with that employee, so they understand, here's what's happening on day one, you're going to go here, this is what's going to happen, here's your onboarding template to review, you don't have to do anything. So I think for us, really having those touch points that were human really made a huge difference. And so we're seeing at the 90-day check-in, we're seeing the result of that. A, people are there in 90 days, so that's always good. B, we're getting that feedback that day one felt really special, and everything after that kind of was a continuation of day one. So for us, it's really focusing on, we call it pre-boarding. So it's like a flight, right? So you're sort of before you get on the plane.
Yeah, so onboarding starts from the day you really applied to the company.
Yeah,
in a sense.
it is,
Yeah,
right? You're building
good point.
trust from that whole point.
Yeah, good point. I was just reflecting on, as you've been sharing what you've been doing, I can think of the leader role is really paramount in this. Is there anything you did to actually invest and upskill the leaders in understanding their role in employee experience? Because at the end of the day, we can do all these things, we can give people great technology, we can give them a great day one experience, but it's that interaction they have with their leader and how they feel a sense of belonging and all of those things that I think, from my perspective, has a big part to do with an employee's essentially journey and satisfaction at work. So is there sort of a piece that you did on leadership development to support as well?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Yeah, a little bit. We talked, leaders own that day-to-day coaching, they own the development, they own, so much of that journey for the employee. We're just sort of at the beginning of the end sometimes. And so I really talk about, getting back to getting to know them. That's not just about what do they want to do in their career or, at Lawrie Insurance Group. One thing we implemented that wasn't happening was the hiring manager has to take the employee and the team out on day one. Because it's such a busy time in that 90 days. I don't know you get a chance to really meet people. And I would say the rule was no work talk. You can ask, the employee can ask how long somebody's been there. If they bring it up, that's fine. But it's really try to stay away from work, right? You're really trying to get to know them. Because all that matters. I think somebody talked about the journey depends on, those life milestones too. And that's really important in how we do it. They will run and grow. But you know what? I've got 3 little kids at home under the age of 5. I cannot take on one more thing. But you know what? In 3 years, when they're all in school, I'm your guy, right? So we really think about those things and how we plan out how we grow people, and part of that succession planning, and how we grow people laterally and intentionally moving them up through the organization.
I love that. I love the no work talk.
That was hard.
Yeah, because you think about how we introduce ourselves and how we even, right? We talk about what we do and actually being intentional to kind of, okay, that's great, but tell me about yourself, right?
Yeah.
And making that deliberate, because that's not necessarily natural for all leaders. So giving them those kind of tips to make sure that they're really focusing on getting to know the human versus just the role they play at work. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and I mean, we get to know our clients, so why wouldn't we get to know our employees? But it was hard. Like, there was times where I'm like, here's a cue card. I think here's some topics. Right?
Yeah.
Don't talk about this, but talk about these things, right?
Yeah.
Like let them bring it up. But it's who we are. We are family owned, and we treat our employees like family. And I say that in quotes because I know it's not the politically correct thing to say, but it's important because that really changes how we get to know people.
I agree, absolutely. I think earlier I kind of mentioned a little bit about employee listening. So, and we know that that's sort of everywhere, and it's a bit of a buzzword these days. But acting on what you hear is the harder part. So how do you talked about the 90 days specifically and how you take action there, but are there some other areas in your employee lifecycle journey where you kind of pull those nuggets through what you've heard in your listening strategy and take action? Can you share a little more on that?
Yeah, I think, we've got a lot of open door policy. The great thing for us about having one location is at some point you're going to see everybody. But leadership's in for the most part, unless you're kind of a salesperson and have to be on the road. Leadership's in 5 days a week. And so, hey, Bob, do you have 5 minutes to talk to me? I've got an idea. Or we went through this process yesterday. We're implementing something, whatever that is. And, I worked at company B before and we tried this. Do you think we could do that? So there is a lot of communication that way. We do the regular things like survey. People can come in and, they can, send an email wherever they want. But for us, it's really give me that feedback in person because we're going to talk that out right then and there. And we're going to try something out. And so for us, we've done things that don't work. We've done things that do work. I remember once we got feedback from somebody who said, I'm going on maternity leave and I've got that 2-week top up. Or that 2-week EI period, the waiting period, and I have no income coming in. And so, I talked to my boss and wow, how can we fix that? Oh my gosh. And so that's how we started for a company our size. We started to just pay their salary through those 2 weeks, whether you were a mom or a dad. But to know that that was making an impact to them financially was an easy check mark for us. But I think if we hadn't gotten that feedback right away, and been able to sort of, what, Kate, that was great feedback. Thank you. Here's what we're going to do for you. And she feels like she's really changed the organization. So
that's awesome. Mm-hmm. I think you just reiterated the power of the conversation.
It really
right?
is.
There's so many low-hanging fruit items that are pain points for employees that, as leaders, we just may not know about because we just haven't had the conversation and asked people.
Yeah.
What gets in your way of doing a good job and enjoying what you do every day, right?
Yeah,
This is the power of a good question and actually having a conversation.
Yeah.
Speaking of conversation, we've had a great conversation. I'd like to open it up to the floor. I'm sure some folks have been thinking of some questions along the way in what you've shared, Rose. So I'd like to open up and see who has a question for Rose.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so far for all of the advice you've given us. I wanted to kind of explore the size of the organization you work in and how you were able to take the processes you've described and scale them out. And the reality is that doing an hour-long interview with every person who makes it to 90 days is achievable for some employers. What would be your recommendation for employers who maybe are multinational or 200% turnover?
Yep.
We're talking retail sales. So, those companies that are just bleeding new hires continuously. We need to stop that cycle. So what methods would you recommend to achieve something that is akin to what you've already described, but scalable?
Yeah. So such a good question. Even for an organization our size, there's myself and 2 other HR people, which seems like a lot of people for 140 people, but one person is doing 90-day check-ins, and so the conversation with the management team of where do you want us to spend our time? We can spend our time processing stuff, or we can spend our time really getting feedback from people. And how do we prioritize that as a team? And so that was the conversation. That was super important. But things fell off in order for us to do, and things continue to fall off in order for us to do that. And that's just the cost of doing that, because it's such an important piece for us. Like, the best feedback we get is in that 90 days. They've made their decision to stay or go by those 90 days. And so for us, now the word is out. People come in, and other people have said, wait till 90 days. Like, oh my God, it's 90 days is such a good time. So for us, it's a trade-off. You know, we just did a report. We had 9 90-day check-ins in April. That's all the HR manager did. But the other side of that now is we're getting to dissect all of that information. It's given us great information for onboarding, because clearly we've onboarded 9 people. So, okay, now we've got to make some tweaks so that we can scale it. It can continue to be that event. So it's just the trade-off in priority.
If I can add one, just a thought too, I can appreciate if there's a lot of people exiting, you're a large corporation, a lot of people exiting, like you mentioned, an hour long. I would recommend focusing in on, we call them at our company, regrettable losses. So you have those employees that they're hurting that you've left. We all have employees that, let's be frank, we're happy they've left. So I would invest your conversations and your interviews and really prioritize those. If you can't do it with everyone, focus in on those regrettable losses, because that's where you really want to glean those insights to find out why those particular individuals left.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I think there was
one
a hand over here, and then
it was over here.
there was, one down here.
Thank you. So you talked a lot about...
Please welcome back your host.
Oh,
Ooh. That'll be us for now.
thank you. You talk a lot about that milestone at the 90-day mark. I think the organization I'm with right now and my team, we do pretty well in that upfront of the first year for employees in terms of milestones, but I do feel we're lacking past year one. And I'm curious if you have anything that you've implemented or that's working really well or has not worked well that you've tried to implement as a milestone past year one, and what that outcome has been.
Yeah, so we've tried a couple of things. We have a little bit of a cohort now that has just passed the 2-year mark, and so we had kind of meetings with them. So not really 90-day check-in, not really a stay interview, more you have the benefit of being here 2 years now. What is it you wish you had known, and when did you wish you learned it? So for us, that's the touch point, and what we're asking is, like, you know all this now, how would you change when you learned something now that you know it? So that's something we're working through with a lot of people in that 2 to 3 year mark. I would say one tweak we did, probably with our annual evaluations, I say that in quote because they're not really that, is they are touch points with that manager, and they are more conversational about career development as opposed to performance, right? We talk a lot about performance throughout the year. So for us, that's just the point where, yeah, you're going to get your increase, but we're going to spend an hour talking about your career and what do you want to learn and how do we continue to build that year over year. So we did make a couple of tweaks to some things we already had so that it wasn't another meeting. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay. I think there was one there, yeah.
Can you share with us 2 of those pointed questions that you would ask at that 90-day 1-hour meeting?
Did what we talk about in the interview reflect where you are today? Right, so in the interview process, we have 2 to 3 maybe interviews, and all of the things we talk about what your day-to-day looks like, is that what it looks like at 90 days? That's really important for us because that tells us the job posting is reflective of the day-to-day. That tells us we're asking the right questions in the interview so that we're giving the right information for people, so that's really important. And we're asking, if you could snap your fingers and change one thing, what would it be? And that's really where we've got the bucket of things. Those are a lot in the parking lot, which is all good stuff. It's just, again, you're talking about priorities. But those are 2 pointed questions. And that, you know, if you could snap your fingers, that could be the company, that could be the department, that could be whatever's on your mind at that day.
Those are great questions.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we think about having this laundry list of questions and a whole set, but sometimes it's a
So
couple of
sometimes
really good
easy, right?
questions
Yeah.
that you
Keep it
gain the
easy.
right insights from. Thanks
Yep.
for sharing that.
Yep.
Was there another? Yep, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Agnes. I'm from the city of St. Catharines. How much technology do you use in the onboarding process versus like the human personal interaction?
Remarkably, not that much. So the front end where, we're looking at that paperwork piece and that administration, that part's okay. We do a lot via DocuSign that way. We are, I would say, behind from an HRIS perspective, and I just haven't figured out where I want that to go yet. So that front end is easy for the employee because we do that part like in technology. But a lot of pieces are still in person. Orientation is still in person. Onboarding is anywhere from 1 month to 90 days, depending on your level of experience. You are in the office 5 days a week. If you can't commit to that, we're not hiring you. Because that part is really important. It is the day-to-day, it is the hallway. When you think about, we are a hybrid work environment, so after that 90 days, hybrid's available to you. But I'm the new person. I'm the one who has to figure it out. So I need those people there, and I need to be there. So remarkably, we have a lot of still the human interaction and collaboration, and that keeps us authentic to who we are and kind of keeps our culture how we got it to where it is today. So hopefully that's why we have 3 people too.
I love how you're constantly prioritizing connection, like organic interactions. I think that's awesome. I think we have time for one final question, if anyone, yeah.
I wanted to ask a question about your exit interviews and the way that you're using and you're interpreting, the result, the data. In my experience, interviews are trickier. If you look at your company as a family, that person is kind of leaving the family, whether voluntarily or non-voluntarily. And it's kind of, sometimes it's easier to let the bias get in the way of interpreting the data. So what is your experience and how are you approaching your exit interviews?
Yeah, great question. So for us, we looked at offboarding and whether that's voluntary or involuntary. The goal is it's not a surprise. So if we are doing our touch points right throughout the journey, then we know whether someone's going to leave, whether they're leaving or we're asking them to leave. And so for us, the focus is on the person who voluntarily leave, because when we're letting somebody go, while in a lot of the terminations, people are saying, yeah, no, I know, we've had a lot of conversations, so I know what was coming. That still doesn't mean they're ready to give feedback. So for us, it's really trying to focus on the people where the feedback will be meaningful. We're okay to hear the criticism. We're not perfect. We don't do everything right. So we need that commentary for us to get better. And so at that right time is really when we talk about getting information. So a lot of times people stick to, you got to get the exit interview before they go or the day after or whatever that is. And we sort of think about it differently. For us, it's, I'd love to have a conversation. Let's get together for coffee. I'd love to get that feedback about the organization. And we let them talk. So we've probably got 3 or 4 questions to get the conversation going. But we want that feedback. So we really think about who's the right person on the HR team to have that conversation. Some people are not comfortable speaking to me. I don't know why, but anyway. Some people are more comfortable speaking to the manager. Some people more comfortable speaking to the coordinator. So we really try to pick and choose that moment where the feedback will be meaningful for us. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks for the engagement. That was great.
Thank you.
I'm going to wrap up with one final question. It's always we think about if you were to do it again, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently embarking on this employee listening and employee journey?
Yeah, really good question. I might have, we really prioritized onboarding and offboarding. And that was where we could have some easy early wins to build the trust because we really didn't have a lot there. But now I can see we probably in the middle of the development is where I'm like, I probably should have paid more attention to these 2 things.
Awesome. That was great.
Yeah.
Thanks, Rose.
Thank you for a good conversation. Yeah.
I just am reflecting on what I took away from the conversation is is the importance of the conversation and getting feedback. And to your question earlier, it doesn't need a bunch of fancy tech and dashboards and all of these things. It's really just being intentional to actually seek feedback at different points in the journey and take action.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Happy to connect with anybody if you want to continue the conversation. So thank you.